Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi music YouTuber, and welcome to something pretty special as it's someone's birthday out there. It's my very special older brother's birthday. Happy birthday. No, I did not forget your name, but I don't know the intricacies of the subculture for which I'm about to be discussing so thoroughly today. So for your own safety, but happy birthday. Hope it's great. Hope you're doing well. And remember, give me some PBRs because my 21st is very soon. And if you're wondering, my special older brother, if you're watching this, no, I'm not posting this to Facebook. Don't want my other relatives to watch it. If they do, that's what happens. But today, we are talking about, of course, YG's hit debut record, My Krazy Life. Now, this album is very special for many, many reasons. YG, in a way, is kind of known as near the peak of current West Coast LA hip hop. He's kind of defined himself a very specific sound. Unfortunately, that sound has now been repeated so commonly, and it's really been dialed down to a very specific sound. If you want a song that is overly hook reliant and is really based on like one or two jokes, one maybe being the beat being a classical or like soundtrack sample, and the lyrics having like a lyrical motif that is like a joke the whole time, that's basically what the scene has devolved from. But you can kind of look at the person responsible to a degree as YG. And that's not detracting from YG's quality, because YG has some things that a lot of these other rappers do not. One, he's ballsy, as we're about to see on this record. He comes in hard, and he doesn't take his foot off the gas for even like a second in terms of effective songwriting, good bars. There are a couple weaker bars, but we'll talk about that later. We actually get a really well thought out record here, and one that I think is really solidly effective. And also, it's my older brother's favorite album. So happy birthday. Here's your favorite album as far as I can tell. And I want to discuss one of the reasons this album is so influential now is his collaboration with DJ Mustard on at least one of the tracks here has coined a very, very effective, yet now it's kind of done to death, idea of making a beat where you'll have a piano sample either doing chords, forming the beat, with, of course, that typical 808 hi-hat built beat with a swamped out 808 bass underneath the whole thing to create what is effectively the prototypical current West Coast hip-hop album. YG has kind of perfected that in a way with his work with DJ Mustard. Do I think it is a perfect sound? Not necessarily, but I think it's a very effective sound. And you can easily compare this to a whole bunch of other West Coast hip-hop artists. One that I'm very familiar with myself is Kendrick Lamar, and I love his album Good Kid, Mad City. And one thing I can compare these two albums with is Good Kid, Mad City is more of a reflection, with a whole lot of that reflection being on the West Coast hip-hop scene and all the music being made retrospectively with the perspective of West Coast hip-hop and making something sort of in honor of it. But what YG does here is he makes another West Coast hip hop album. It's not as much like sort of like living up to the standard of those past albums and doing it in sort of like remembrance of them and sort of like in reverence, but instead it's continuing it to a more modern era, and it is building upon these old ideas. And there are a lot of little moments where you'll have that like slide synth that uses those old ideas. But I'm gonna get into the track list real quick, and you'll see how the structure of this album as a whole is pretty effective. A lot of the lyrics are pretty solid, and his energy is exactly what you come listen to YG for. So you start off with the Mama Speech intro. This is a quick little 15-second track that's just sort of a bit of a person who I'm assuming is YG's mother talking on this track about be home by a certain time. Basically, don't get into trouble. And it's a funny little intro, and then it goes straight into the next track, which is BPT. So basically on this track, you get a super fun build with an incredible hook before the whole thing is swamped out with the most thick 808 synths. If you hear someone driving by and you hear the metal on their car rattling together, there's a chance they're listening to BPT, because this thing is so insanely rumbly, and it's a really effective opener in this way that it instantly gets everyone moving. And the bars are the exact opposite of humble, but that's kind of what makes it fun. And what the song doesn't have is a hook on the very tail end of the track. You got the super hype thing going on and on and on. You got the hook, verse, sort of another instrumental bit, and then straight into the next track, which is part of why this opening of this album is so darn effective, because it goes into the track I Just Want to Party featuring Schoolboy Q and J-Rock, which is following the trend of the ultra hype YG track that's just throwing punches at you. And the intro is most likely the highlight of this track here, because YG, you'll notice listening to this album, has such a good ear for hooks and intros and memorable lyrics. He will stick in your head all day if you listen to it even just once. And if you just look at the lyrics, super effective, super punchy, super in your face. And honestly, like, who can't relate to that? There are a lot of highlights to this track, like a Schoolboy Q's line, "We break on jars," since VCRs, I think is pretty hilarious. In J-Rock, his bars are highly aggressive, which is really effective at the tail end of the track, because if the track was running out of steam, or the album at this point was for somehow running out of steam, J-Rock immediately puts it back with just how fiery his delivery is. Then you gotta have the twerk anthem, then we got Left Right. And the hook on this track is very, very simple, but I mean, when simplicity works, you run with it. And I could probably think of a better example than this track, but I think this track follows that example excellently. I think every single genre in music history has proven an example of something so incredibly simple and just drilling it into the ground and making it super hype as a process. I could compare that to black metal, any other kind of metal genre, any kind of hip-hop genre. Even like one-word hooks can be super effective. Of course, there are times where this fails, a la Pushin' P, the new Gunna track. Garbage, but Left Right is fire. And if the piano stuff was getting a little old for you, fortunately this beat switches up a little bit with a violin sample, and I doubt it brings back Appalachian American folk traditions, but it's still hype. It really brings it all back together, and I can't help but love it. Also, the pre-hook to the hook is also excellent. Again, YG's ear for hooks is incredible. And there's an interlude bit that happens at the end of this track that's also rather funny. And of course, how could you forget, except I forgot because this is re-recording later, the ultimate track, Bickin' Back Bein' Bull. So you got these massive synth sounds that form a super solid beat. And if you don't know why it's called Bickin' Back Bein' Bull, here's the thing. YG is a known supporter and collaborator with the Bloods gang, and they got a thing where they replace all the C's in their verses and what they say with B's. So it's kicking back being cool, but it's bicking back being bull. And that really forms the hook here, but also some of the verses, a lot of words that you don't expect to be replaced with a B, they show up out of nowhere, and it's always pretty refreshing. There's also an excellent bar, quote, "Wifey like Sega, I don't play that bitch." Who cares about Sega anymore? Also, love the flow here. I think it's one of the strongest flows on the track. Also, I really like the bar, "Selling O's like Cheerios." Then there's a track, "Meet the Flockers," featuring TC. This is a track about robbing people's houses. It's basically a track on how to rob a house, and it's pretty short, at just around like 2 minutes in length, which I love that it's included at this short length. It's kind of humorous in this regard, but I think it's pretty effective as well. And the way this beat is constructed is classic G-Funk traditions really brought to a modern aesthetic here. You got one of my favorite things ever is that G-Funk slide synth sound, that glide synth that you hear all over 90s West Coast hip-hop. And the fact that it's not used as much anymore is criminal because it's so good. And there's this really thick plucked bass sound that fills up the whole beat. And if the beats were getting a bit repetitive for you, it's changed up. And it's honestly really, really good here. And the song is a bit short. It's a bit on the chiller side, but I think it's a good way to cut up the momentum of this album here. And I guess on the second track of the sort of quarter period of the album here, it's well, I can't say it, but it's on the screen. And this is featuring Jeezy, and one of the biggest flaws on this album, Rich Homie Quan, is on this track. It is a repetitive song, I'll say. Borderline comically so. I think for a degree it's a bit comical. But the beat is honestly really cool. It's got this really staccato, like individual punchy bass sound with some really thick 808 as well. 2 different bass elements in your beat. Really cool idea. And it's a way to inject some more adrenaline into the track list. Rich Homie Quan, he's passable, I guess, but like not for me. And then we get into, I guess you could say, like the cheating arc of the album, which starts with "Do It To Ya," featuring, I think his name is T-Flea, but I couldn't tell you what that name is. And it's got this really nice piano-led beat. It's borderline sweet sounding. And if you want to know what T-Flea does, if you haven't gotten in this album yet, he basically would fulfill the role that maybe like a Chris Brown would in any of these songs, but to be honest, I think he does a better job. I think the riffing he does with his voice is really effective. I think he's got a lot of good aspects to his voice. I think he's a good singer, and you shouldn't be giving Chris Brown your money. So give this guy your money, unless he's not a good person. I don't know. This song is pretty explicit, I'll say. So if that's not your thing, just give this one a skip. Some of the bars on this track are rather creative, and they make it a lot less more feeling like a voyeurant and more like you're kind of in on it. Like there's the bit where he says he's saying grace before he's about to eat it, or the fact that he's having his government name screamed. I think that's hilarious. But like it's a good way of taking a song that is like could feel like overly explicit, but like just tone it down in a way that's like really approachable. Is it my favorite track on the track list? No, but I think it's more effective than like your average like WAP, for example, which that song isn't necessarily my favorite thing. I think the beat's a little stale. I think the beat on this track is probably a little bit better. It was done like 6 years earlier. And then you get the track Me and My Bitch featuring Tory Lanez. So transitioning into the song is pretty funny because you have this bit of YG having sex with someone, and then in the middle of it, he gets a text about his girlfriend cheating on him, and then he's all heartbroken about it. You want to take it with a bit of a grain of salt going into these two tracks. It's kind of funny. You don't really want to go into it like overly serious, and you're like, oh, I can't get with YG here. Yeah, you probably can't, but it's funny. One of my favorite lines. Don't think I'm a little suspicious for this one, but he says, I busted out in 10 minutes. I was in a rush. I love the lines on here that are like secretly bragging, but like it acts like he's like, oh, it's so tough being this phenomenal at everything. I think that's just hilarious. Then it goes into the song Who Do You Love featuring Drake. I know a lot of people hype up Drake, but I think this is one of the times in his career that he was a lot better than he is currently. The song is like as braggadocious as it gets. It's the opposite of humble, and it's sort of like an intermission part of the track list. Not that it's like ultra short or anything, but it kind of divides up the structure of the album into its next portion that I'm about to talk about. But this is another one of the hype tracks. If you paired it up with the first 4 tracks, if you include the intro track, it would fit perfectly there. But I think it actually works better this deep into the track list because then it gets used actually as like another hit of adrenaline, so you can really focus in on the more introspective tracks that come after. And if it wasn't enough adrenaline on its own, the Drake feature certainly gives it another hit that is very effective. Ton of hype, and just the hook, bitch, who do you love? Come on, that's pretty good. It's pretty great stuff. First time you hear that, it's like really hype, and like you can tell YG probably curated like 5, maybe 6 of these songs to be phenomenal live, because if you're not just jumping to this stuff, then you're probably deaf. But even deaf people can like feel vibrations, so you could feel those 808s like shaking the ground. And then we go into what is my brother's least favorite track. Of course he's wrong for that. It's Really Be Smoking and Drinking, featuring the one and only Kendrick Lamar. It's got this sort of ominous, like bassy synth sound with these, I want to say, a noir synth that goes on top. It's really ominous, and honestly, like it's kind of scary sounding. And I think YG really stepped up his beat game, or DJ Mustard, or whoever was collaborating on this track here. And the bars that YG brings here are some of the best on the album. They're really personal, and they're even borderline harrowing here, how personal and how almost like scary they get. And it's even a pretty sad track. For being the longest track on the album, I think it totally justifies the whole track length. The lyrics are all really effective. It's a really sad track because it talks a whole lot about loss and feeling lonely, which with YG, who's kind of a party animal, you wouldn't really expect him to be alone that often, but he talks about all the people that have like died in his life, and all the times that he's been met with serious misfortune. And you don't even need to hear me say this, but Kendrick is Kendrick here, and he does a phenomenal job. He does kind of switch up his flow to match YG a bit more, but I think there's no problem with that, and I think it sounds actually pretty great. And then there's the track 1 a.m. which is actually a really interesting story track about how YG was, I don't know how real the story is, but he robs a store with a guy who egged him on to do it, and then in the middle of it, he actually gets, or actually at the end of this track in particular, he gets betrayed by this very same friend that brought him here. I also love the bass line on this track. I think the bass sound is one of the strongest on the album. And for a track that has no features, YG really steps up to the plate and he brings it for the whole time. It's another ominous track, and that it kind of like further pushes us through this part of the album. And it shows that Really Be isn't just a standalone track. It shows that it has potential for a whole section of the album. And it shows that YG has potential as a good lyricist and a good storyteller. And next is the song Thank God, which features Big TC and RJ Brown. And this song is about a phone call to, I believe, YG's mother from YG's friends telling him that he's arrested. And the way that it's mixed is that it's sent through like a phone call filter, which actually I think for the purpose of how the song sounds like sonically, it works super well. I think it really sets the tone a lot better than anything else could. And narratively, especially in this point of the album, it's another great track. And I think it's pretty interesting that it's a track without YG actually on it, except for the very, very end where he has a bit of an interlude part. And then there's the song Sorry Mama featuring Ty Dolla $ign. And if it's featuring Ty Dolla $ign, you know the rules. It's gonna be a great song. And Ty Dolla $ign, he's actually not used that much lyrically on this track. He's really just for the hook. And I forget sometimes, but this track reminds me, Ty Dolla $ign's got a pretty solid voice. And I love the beat, how the beat has this really awesome piano lead part with the same G-Funk glide synth that goes over the top of it. Sounds excellent. YG really brings the lyrics to close out the album here. It's super sad. A lot of it is just confessions he makes to his mother about like taking money from her purse or like stealing from people. It's really sad, and it's like, damn, it sucks that it ended this way. And then what's also really nice about it is that it sort of ends sort of like retrospectively, like on an outsider perspective, where YG's like out of jail and he's like talking about how he was in jail. And it's kind of an uplifting part of the album. I'm fine with an album ending kind of sad. I've dealt with that a whole lot, and I think it's something that still works pretty well. But I do understand YG going on a more happy note to end the album, and I think it works well. So is this album perfect? Nah, I mean, a couple of the features aren't amazing. A couple of the beats are a little samey. But there isn't a track here that I would be upset to listen to again. I think they're all honestly pretty solid. Could it have basically blown my mind a few more times than it did? Yeah, sure. I mean, YG's lyrically pretty solid, but he could bring it a few more times, I guess. The beats could be upped on a couple tracks, and I'm sure YG has done that on later albums. So I'm sure if you had like sort of a compilation of his best tracks, you could just scoop clean My Krazy Life and throw in a couple tracks from a couple later albums. So what am I feeling for this album? I'm feeling an iFunny. It's a solid album. I think YG has room to improve from here. Unfortunately, most people agree that his next album after this one is his best, and then he's just declined from there, which is rather unfortunate because I think he's a good artist. He's got a lot going for him. He's smart. He's fun to listen to. And that's all I really got to say about that. So, happy birthday. If it's still April 10th while this is uploaded, hope you're doing well. Hope you get some good cake today. Get some good presents. Hope the family's doing well. Say hi to them all for me if they're not watching this. But I hope you guys are all doing well at home and the rest of the internet out there. Go ahead and like and subscribe. Comment down below any comments, questions, and concerns. My social media is in the description. Join my Discord. Follow my Twitter. Follow my Instagram. And I hope you guys are doing well out there. Have a good day. Bye.